Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse. Today we begin our Cure series where we take a look at our favorite 2 tracks from the first 4 albums. Todd Evans, Reed Little, and I will be looking at more of their catalog next month, so stay tuned. The Cure are an English rock band formed in 1978 in Crawley, West Sussex. Throughout numerous lineup changes since the band's formation, guitarist, lead vocalist, and songwriter Robert Smith has remained the only consistent member. 3 Imaginary Boys, along with several early singles, placed the band in the post-punk and new wave movements that had sprung up in the United Kingdom. Beginning with their second album, 17 Seconds, the band adopted a new, increasingly dark and tormented style, which together with Smith's stage look had a strong influence on the emerging genre of gothic rock, as well as the subculture that eventually formed around the genre. But before we start, let's look at some upcoming and current programming on the channel. Coming soon on the Contrarians, Martin, Marco, Todd, and I took a look at The Doors. This is what I consider the Contrarians' quote-unquote extreme episode. I'm not sure when this will be released, but please keep your eyes peeled for this upcoming episode on the Contrarians. Check out our panel discussion on Obscure Albums number 4. This was just live streamed last night and the panel had a blast. I thought this was going to be the last episode in the series, but the panel voted and the series will continue. Stay tuned for more episodes coming in August, but in the meantime, check out the latest episode in Obscure Albums. Ryan, Davey, Rand, and I looked at the Beach Boys' 1970 album Sunflower. This was also streamed last night, and what a blast. I want to thank everyone who showed up in the chat. We have more Beach Boys content to come. In fact, I think next month we are going to look at the Beach Boys album Carl and the Passions, so stay tuned. Todd Evans and I will be looking at the acclaimed Georgia band Guadalcanal Diary. We will be having a general discussion and having a look at their 4 Elektra releases. This will be coming up in August, so stay tuned for that. So let's get started and take a look at The Cure with Todd Evans and Reed Little. We're going to look at those top 2 from the first 4. Hey, this is Grant with Grant's Rock Warehouse, and today I have 2 special guests. You've seen them on the Contrarians, Rock Daydream Nation. They're everywhere. I've got Todd Evans and Reed Little. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you doing today? And I am assuming you're ready to talk some Cure.
Great. Glad to be here.
Good.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It should be fun. Well, why don't we just get started? I'm just going to hand it over to Reed, and we'll just work around. We'll go Reed, Todd, and then me.
Okay. All right. So let me just talk a bit about The Cure first before I get into hitting the first album. And I've told some of this story on the Contrarians, but it bears repeating. So I am not a long-term fan of The Cure. The Cure are what, Martin Popoff is always talking about retirement bands. When he retires, he's going to get these bands and just go sit down and go through their entire catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And I am retired, and I thought, well, why am I not doing that? So The Cure was one of the bands that I decided to do. Mm-hmm. But previously, and it's been a while ago now, so I don't remember exactly how long, but quite a while ago, at the Dallas Guitar Show, I met Reeves Gabrels. Reeves is currently the guitar player in The Cure. He previously worked with David Bowie. He has solo projects. And he's a lot of fun to talk to. And I had an import CD from a band called X World 5 that he had played on. And he was so impressed that somebody had a copy of this that he was just happy to stand there and talk to me. He was at the Reverend Guitars booth. He had just come out with a Reverend guitar. And he was talking about joining The Cure. And at that point, the only Cure that I ever knew was from the MTV videos. And the only one that stuck in my mind was their video for Let's Go to Bed, mm-hmm. which is a really, not too different from any other like new romantic kind of song that was going on at the time. So I told him, I was like, The Cure, well, that's kind of a weird fit for you because Reeves is so outside. No pun intended. And he looked at me and goes, you've never really listened to The Cure, have you? And I went, okay, you know what? That's fair enough. I need to give The Cure a try. So I went home and looked through my wife's CD collection, and she had a copy of Disintegration. And Disintegration was the very first thing I ever listened to from The Cure, and I was hooked. Sort of. I loved it, but I didn't want to necessarily get into other Cure stuff. And then I picked up a couple of other Cure CDs, and then my wife got me some Cure CDs for my birthday. And then when we were preparing for this one, I've just kind of hopped back and forth, though, a little bit earlier, a little bit later. I had never listened to their first several albums. So, in preparation for this show, it's the very first times I ever listened to Three Imaginary Boys, 17 Seconds, and Faith. Now, I'd heard Pornography. It was the second Cure CD I ever picked up because some YouTube channel I watched said it was part of their like Gothic trilogy with Disintegration. Um, so coming at this band with completely fresh ears in terms of 3 of these 4 albums. And I must say, I enjoy them all. I want to get that out of the way up front. I have listened to all of them several times, but of these 4 albums, I think that Three Imaginary Boys is my least favorite. And that's probably because coming in as I did much later in The Cure's development, to me, it's the most unlike The Cure that I first encountered. In fact, I think Three Imaginary Boys is very much a generic post punk album. Robert Smith has a very kind of punk vocal delivery. The bass is very prominent in the mix. Post punk always had too much bass. There's way too much reverb on the vocals, and I had to listen to. I got to tell you, the first time I listened to it, I went, well, it's okay. And then I thought, well, I've got to come up with a couple of tracks. And the first time, nothing stood out to me. I was like, okay, this may be a challenge. Listen to it again. Okay, still not coming up with anything. So I went through my other albums, came back and went, we're getting down to the wire. I've got to pick out 2 tracks. And by then it had clicked. And I was like, oh, okay, it's this track and it's this track. But I still think that this album is The Cure in larval form. A lot of times when you talk about rock bands, how often their first album was like the Glory album because they spent years and years in bars practicing and honing their craft to produce that one album, and it's the best thing they're ever going to do. Post punk, though, didn't have that same experience. Those guys often just got together and went and bought cheap studio time and went for it, and they didn't spend years writing and rehearsing their songs. And I think at this point in his career, Robert Smith didn't really know what he wanted to sound like, so he kind of sounded like everybody in the London scene. But after working through it, the tracks that I decided were my favorite are track 1, 10:15 Saturday Night, and Object. So 10:15 Saturday Night starts off with, I've always liked songs that are a little theater of the mind, right? You can see images, and this whole thing about the guy sitting listening to his dripping faucet, drip, 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 drip. That's a very visual image. It's really easy to put your own little music video together in your head to go with the song. Plus, it's got some energy to it, and it doesn't sound like I say this is their most generic post-punk album, but that song is not generic post-punk. It has a lot of personality. It's not the personality that I would later associate with The Cure, but it still has a lot of personality. On the other hand, by the time you get to Object, he's got a completely different vocal delivery on it. It's a very energetic track. It's more guitar, less bass focused. Oh, I forgot. 10:15 Saturday Night. It's generic post-punk until he gets to that squalling guitar solo. And that's really where The Cure steps out and like isolates themselves from the post-punk pack, in my opinion, because there wasn't, post-punk didn't do a lot of guitar solos. So I really like that about it. But in Object, it's more riffy. It's less bass oriented, and I think his lyrics are a lot more interesting. Now, clearly, Robert Smith's lyric game wasn't where it was going to be yet, but lines like "I don't mind, no, I just don't care. I've got no objections to you touching me there." Um, it's interesting. It's an interesting place to go with his lyrics, and it kind of indicates that already he had a train of thought that was very, very different. So those two tracks, I said it took a while, but now those two really stand out for me. But I like the whole album. It's not my favorite of theirs, but if I did like if I just put The Cure on shuffle, I don't bypass any of the songs when they come up. Maybe their Jimi Hendrix cover, which got included against Robert Smith's wishes. It's not the best Jimi Hendrix cover I've ever heard.
No, Chris Perry wanted that on there. Well, he wanted Object, the Hendrix cover, and some other track on there. I can't remember off the top of my head.
But he was right about Object. That's a great song.
Well, Object's yep. Exactly. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. So my experience with The Cure is I worked at the campus radio station, and at the time I started working there when I was in college at UGA, University of Georgia, Standing on the Beach had just come out. The Cure had just signed to Elektra, and Standing on the Beach came out, and it was after just slightly after The Head on the Door came out. And so when it comes to early Cure, I really got into Head in the Door, but when it comes to the early stuff, I know the songs that are on Standing on the Beach, and that's what I've always had. And in fact, I think I didn't always buy cassettes, but I think I started with the cassette of that because it had the album on one side, and then if you flipped it over, it had a whole bunch of B-sides.
Had all the B-sides.
Yeah. So I think that was the first thing I had. So I've always liked all of the things that are real concert staples for them. And but there were a lot of songs I hadn't heard. Like I hadn't heard Three Imaginary Boys until I prepped for a show that we did on the Contrarians about picking our favorite Cure albums. And so I'm relatively new to these albums, probably just 2-3 months in. But for Three Imaginary Boys, my choices couldn't be more predictable. My first choice is 10:15 Saturday Night. And the first thing I wrote in my notes was great guitar solo. But one of the things I like about this song is the great dynamics. It goes from really quiet to really loud, and back and forth between that. And I also really like the visual of the drip 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 part. That was Reed mentioned that, and that also made an impression on me. It makes the song easy to like. It makes that one easy to remember which one it is. But my second choice I picked was Three Imaginary Boys. So like I said, quite predictable. That's where you get, I don't think the Cure are fully formed yet. I agree with that. But Three Imaginary Boys is where you first get that really pure sounding rhythm guitar sound that becomes more of one of their characteristics when you get to 17 seconds. And so it's like it doesn't have any distortion, but I guess it's got chorus on it. I don't know. I'm not a guitarist.
Yeah, there's either flange or chorus.
Something. Yeah. And so that's the first song where you get, to me, as far as what I was listening to, that's where you first get that guitar sound from them, which they use a lot later. And another great guitar solo on that song. So the rest of the songs I have an honorable mention. I almost put Object as my honorable mention, but a lot of the other songs don't really stand out. I agree with that. But as an honorable mention, I picked Another Day because that one I thought I like that one a little bit better than some of the others. But yeah, those are my very predictable choices.
There's nothing wrong with that. Very good. My whole how did I get into the Cure? The first album I bought was Head on the Door, which came out in 85. And for the life, I remember, how we've always talked about how everything goes back to Night Flight or MTV, or it goes back to Night Flight once again, because they used to play those early Cure videos. Now, if you remember those videos from like 85, they were so ahead of their time and so creative. I mean, heck, even the work on, if you watch Love Cats or Let's Go to Bed, those videos are all great. I don't think the Cure ever put out a bad video. You look at the videos on Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, just stunning stuff. Great work. So I first heard, it must have been, gosh, I know it was off the Head Off the Door, but I loved all the videos from that record. So I was hooked right then, picked up Head on the Door, and just, I can't think of a better record that came out in 1985. So ever since then, I've just been hardcore into it. These records are much different. I mean, this is kind of, some people look at like Three Imaginary Boys as the ultimate in the Cure. They never ever sounded like this again. They are one of those bands that totally just went on they progressed so quickly. Because think about it, from 1979 to then 1982 with Pornography, they had progressed quite a bit in a very quick time. But this album is the only album where they sound like this. This isn't, shall we say, goth at this point. This is really just post-punk. And they haven't really came into their own yet. You're right. And this is very, I don't know, what do you call it? Post-punk? Post-rock punk? Punk? I don't know what you call it. It's raw, it's poppy. There's no dirges here, no long suites, just short bursts of energy where the track will be, it'll be at one point in the song and it'll just totally jump to something else. It's incredible. But like everybody else on this panel, my number one was 10:15 Saturday Night. It's an iconic early Cure song. I mean, this was the B-side of Killing an Arab from 1978. And Robert Smith always would put a strong A-side with a strong B-side. He both considered those very important. And if you get that, if you get Join the Dots, this box set, which covers, A-sides, all the B-sides, you can tell that all these B-sides on this box are absolutely brilliant. This is a box set that if you like The Cure, this is a must-have. Highly recommend it if you can pick it up, because it does. It fills in all the dots. But this song, the 10:15 Saturday Night, was the demo that caught Chris Perry's attention in 78 that made him want to sign The Cure. I guess he wrote this like when he was 16, so it had been sitting around a while. But it's a great song. I can't really say any more than what Todd and Reed have said. It's just brilliant. Now, my number two song, I almost went with Object. In fact, when I was doing this, I had Object down. But I went through the record again. I went, I don't know. See, The Cure is very hard for me to categorize and discuss because I kind of look at it like the Beatles. There are so many great Cure songs and the records are so strong, and it's really hard for me to pinpoint two tracks off of these records. But I went with Fire in Cairo, which, I mean, you can trace this back to REM, I think, probably was influenced by this. I mean, it's kind of almost that jangle pop type of thing to some degree. Great chorus, great vocals. It's sparse. The instrumentation's kind of flat. The bass is kind of limited. Robert Smith kind of singing in a monotone. Does have that kind of Eastern influence. But Fire in Cairo was a lot different than like Boys Don't Cry. It kind of took The Cure off into like a, veered off into a certain direction. But I find the song infectious. I think it's one of the standout tracks on the record. Though, like I said, I almost picked Object because I could hear that as a single. But then as I listened to this some more, I kept thinking, wow, I really could hear Fire in Cairo as a single too. It's catchy, it's poppy, danceable.
All right.
and it's a very clean recording, very intimate. I just love it. I love this whole record, even though it is much different than what came down the pike. But you have to start somewhere, And it's
Very
very post-punk, post-pop, I don't know what you call it. It's hard to categorize,
I picked that song as a early number 2 on an early draft, and it got pushed out the more I listened to the album. But I do like that
one. I mean, like I said, it was hard for me to really pick something off of here. But those were my 1 and 2.
Right. Yeah, I mean, clearly going back and listening to these, there's no way that I would have been open to this music in the early 80s or even through the mid 80s. I was just, an angry young metalhead. And there wasn't, now I keep saying it, but I went to a small high school in Montana. There were no Cure fans in my high school. Or if there were, they never talked about it. But I would not have been open to this then. This is a band that I needed to be where I'm at in life before I was like, yo, this music's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never too late. Everyone just, be where you're at. Enjoy what you enjoy.
But if you're getting into the Cure, I wouldn't start with this.
Well, okay. So let's talk about that for a second. So I see there's 2 things there. One, probably not a lot of people are going to think it's their best material. But there's something to be said, and this will segue into 17 seconds for me. There's something to be said for being in a band with their evolution as they go through their albums, right?
Right.
And to me, so 3 Imaginary Boys is off by itself, but 17 Seconds, Faith, and Pornography are very much a set, and there's this ramp up to where they get to this plateau, and Robert Smith goes, okay, that's enough of that, and now I need to go poppy again.
Yeah.
So if you just dive in like I did with Disintegration and Pornography, you're getting the Cure at their most intense, and then you jump to something like 3 Imaginary Boys, that could be a bit jarring. So maybe it really depends. Now, I needed that because I'm a heavy music fan, and I needed the heavy music to draw me in. But that may not be everyone's experience.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So 17 seconds.
17 seconds, yes.
I thought, so first off, a better album across the board for me. And I'm a little off on my Robert Smith, not Cure, but Robert Smith timeline. I can't remember if he went to play for Susie and the Banshees before 17 Seconds or before Faith. It was one of those.
It was before. It was before. Wasn't it like 1982?
That would be between Faith and Pornography. But that might be where it is. I don't know.
Pornography came out in 82. I think it was after Pornography. It was before The Top.
Yeah. Well, he played for Susie and the Banshee for 2 months at some point. And he split with his bass player. I think it was after 17 Seconds and when they did Faith. But so 17 Seconds comes out in 1980. At this point, ironically, even though this album is a huge departure in sound from 3 Imaginary Boys, there's so much Joy Division in this album. I hear so much She's Lost Control in the bass lines. It's crazy. But so the rhythm section is Joy Division, but then the melody instruments are David Bowie's Low, right? It's like a Brian Eno, David Bowie joint. So you combine Joy Division and Brian Eno, David Bowie, and you get kind of where Robert Smith was at. This album, if I have a criticism about the Cure in this period, and it's the same criticism for all 3 of the next albums, 17 Seconds, Faith, and Disintegration, it's that the albums can be a little one tone. I don't want to say one note because they're certainly not, but the music is very the the rhythm section is very repetitive. It usually has a motif that's repeated kind of continuously through the song. And the movement comes from the guitar or the synthesizer if he's got a synthesizer going. And that can cause all of the songs to sound, especially as he's moved into writing longer, more atmospheric pieces. Now, if you're really into that, you can think it's like meditative, right? It puts you in this space and it kind of floats you along. But if you don't like that sort of thing, then all you hear is the repetition and it can kind of turn you off. So in the next 3 albums, I had the exact same experience, which was that of the 2 songs that I'm picking for my best, the first song is always the most different song on the album because I need the contrast. I need that light and shade. I don't want my albums to all sound the same. So the song that was different immediately caught my ear. But then I would go for the most like meditative song I could find, because if I was going to get that experience, I wanted all of it that I could get out of it. And I will say I have not deep dived into Robert Smith's lyrics on these. Although I've looked at some of them, and I always find his lyrics kind of intriguing. My favorite songs on this one, the first one I took was Play for Today. So that's my song that is the different song. I love that bit of white noise, this like repetitive white noise in it. I don't know if that's a heavily gated drum or if that's a synthesizer hitting a white noise note. There's something about white noise, just period, that I like, full stop. And I think it mixes in great with this kind of meditative music. But where the rest of the album is atmospheric, Play for Today is a little bit more energetic. It has a lot of musical movement in it. And honestly, I think that 1 or 2 more songs like that on this album would have broken it up a little bit and brought it up in my estimation. But then my second favorite is A Forest, which I think was the single on this song. Yeah. And it is everything I just said. It is incredibly repetitive. The drums just have like one drum line that it does the entire song. The bass has just a couple of motifs that are repeated over and over again. I can really see it being like a dance track in English clubs in the day. And I understand it was actually a single and did quite well.
Yeah, I got to 31 on the UK singles chart.
So there you go. That's pretty good.
I mean, that's pretty good for a new band.
It's the guitar. So unlike Saturday Night, 10:15 Saturday Night, where he had that kind of squalling feedback guitar, the guitar here is again very atmospheric. It has a solo, but the solo is made of parts rather than like single note lines. So it doesn't take you out of the meditation. It adds this kind of feature part, but the song continues in that sort of floating cloud space. And I find it fascinating that this song feels like a very slow song to me. But if you just listen to the drums, it's actually clicking along at a pretty good rate. Mm-hmm. But the song is not frantic or overly energetic, even when it's moving along. Yeah, I think that's most of my notes. So Play for Today, because it's so different, and then A Forest, because I think it's like the distillation of their sound on this album.
Excellent. Todd, what you got?
Well, I will start with a quick 17-second story. I have a lifelong friend. His name is Bill. He's a keyboardist, and we were roommates when we lived in Athens, Georgia, during school, and mostly after I got out of school. And he was asked to join because he was one of the only guys in town that had a full-on 1980s keyboard rack, with a bunch of Roland stuff and drum machines and all that stuff. And so he was asked to join a band that was going to do one performance. And they were called 17 Seconds. And their one performance was that they played 17 seconds one time at this little club. And it was more of a coffee house than a club. And for whatever reason, there was something I had to do. I had to work or something. I could not go. And I was just distraught over that. But so I always think of that when I start talking about 17 seconds. My choices are not going to be anything new that you haven't heard before on this show. I chose Play for Today. And I feel like Play for Today is where on this album is where you get that rhythm guitar sound I was talking about with no distortion and a great Simon Gallup bass line. The keyboards are subtle, almost like a little organy sound, kind of like they did on Close to Me later. And this song gets better as they move along through the years, and when they play it live, there are live Play for Today with Boris Williams playing the drums, where the song really comes into its own. And and then my second one, I also chose A Forest. It's going to become a concert classic for them. Simple, haunting, repeating melody, which I kind of think in this era of The Cure is kind of like the Cure formula. But I can't get enough of it. They could do it over and over and over, and I wouldn't care. But it has a real subtle, less distorted lead guitar sound that they will use a lot more later. But it's almost like there's a guitar solo, but it's not really a guitar solo. It's just kind of Robert Smith going, I'm going to play for a little while. You're just going to listen to me play the guitar. It's not really a solo. It's because it's more like rhythm guitar, but there's, some picking, and it's really hard to describe, but A Forest, I think, is where that starts. And I really like that a lot, because when I was growing up, I tended to stay away from things that were real mainstream as far as guitar was concerned. Like, I'm just now getting into the Scorpions, but when I was in high school and college, I hated the Scorpions, because as soon as I heard twin guitar, I was like, oh God, it's that twin guitar that everyone does. And so when I heard, songs like A Forest, where basically there's like a whole section of Robert Smith playing the guitar, but it's not like a squealy solo, I was just like, wow, that's really cool. And so I really gravitated towards those kinds of songs. It was really hard for me not to pick M, because I really like M. I think the chord progressions in M are really, really cool. The song goes in directions that you don't think it's going to go in. And I have a recommendation. In 2006, I think it was, Robert Smith came out and he said, The Cure is a trio. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but he said he fired, I can't remember his name, Roger O'Donnell, the keyboardist, who was just totally blindsided. He was just like, we were talking about when the session was, and then all of a sudden he told me I'm fired. And so he told me it was just going to be him and Simon Gallup, and at that time was the new drummer. His name is escaping me right now.
I can't remember who it is.
But anyway, I was not happy when I heard that. I was like, no keyboards, come on. And so what ended up happening was he eventually got Paul Williams to come back. And when they finally toured, they toured as a 4-piece. And they triggered the keyboard sounds with like guitars and pedals and stuff like that. And not my favorite era of The Cure, but it's still pretty good. But they did this thing for, I think it was called Yahoo Live. They did like a 2-song thing on Yahoo, and it was I believe it was 3 and M, the 2 songs that they played, just stripped down to a trio. And the version of M, it was on the internet for years and years and years, and it only exists now. Somebody kept it in relatively poor quality, and they put it on YouTube again. So if you look up M, The Cure, Yahoo 2006, you can find this just them with a black background in a studio playing it live. And man, is it good. I mean, it's so, his guitar sound is so crisp and so pure. And a couple times a year I'll go back and look for that video and play it. When they first put it out, it was like pristine quality. It was like, for the time, really good, YouTube video, and I guess Yahoo took it down from its official position. But yeah, great version of M. But yeah, I almost picked that. I was sorry you got that.
Cool, very good. Well, I'm just going to say that great minds think alike on this program. But before I go to my choices, I do want to say there's something about the band that has progressed from Three Imaginary Boys. If you've noticed, the band has really gotten really tight. And I don't know if it's because we've got Simon Gallup in the band now. It could be. He's probably a lot better. Obviously, he's a much better bass player. But the band just seems, well, they are more robotic, like kind of what Reed said. They're a lot more hypnotic. There's a lot of repetition. But boy, are they tight band now. And the CD that I always play is I've got the Happily Ever After CD that's on A&M, which is a combination of 17 Seconds and Faith. If anybody, I don't know, any of you people care about sound quality, this CD sounds wonderful. And you can really hear the separation in the band, all the instrumentation. They sound fabulous on this CD. I mean, this CD is not futzed with. This is probably just a direct copy. This is back in the days before they were on Elektra, and this is on A&M. Just throwing it out there since we're talking about it, but highly recommend it. But I love the sound of this era, and I'm going to stick Faith in with 17 Seconds because I'm so used to listening to them like this, where it's just one album back to back. You almost could take all these tracks throw them up in the air and they'd all fit together. But my number one choice is Play for Today. Catchy, great melody. It's raw. The bass line, Simon's bass line on here is great. And I do agree. It is very, I don't know if you want to say Joy Division. I guess we could say Joy Division, but it's also very New Order. I mean, as you keep going and you listen to like newer Cure, I always hear Joy Division or New Order in there all the time. Some of their bass lines and just the instrumentation and the way they record the bass, which is darn near like a guitar, it's just a lot of high end. It's very similar to Joy Division. I think that Play for Today would have been a great opener. I think that should have opened it. The keyboard's great. I think that drum machine or that white noise, I think that's a cheap drum machine. Is what I think it is. I don't know if it's like a space. What were those Electro-Harmonix drums? Space drums? God, back in the day, I can't remember. But you would hit them, and they kind of had that cheap kind of. At the time we thought that was cool, but now it's not so cool. But Robert Smith's vocal's great. It's dark. It's got a romantic feel. And what the other thing, by doing research, the Cure did, and I already talked about, they did a lot of videos. They actually made a video for this track, and it wasn't a single, even though I could really hear this as being a single.
Yeah.
Surprised it wasn't the lead off track because it just catches you right when it starts. I love it. It was hard for me to choose songs off of here because I love the whole record. But for number 2, even before we started doing this, I always knew this would have been one of my favorites, and I went with A Forest, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I mean, Pornography is always credited for being the first goth record. But there is so much in these records that you could consider goth. And I think A Forest is a good example. It's hypnotic. It's dark. It's just, I don't know. What was I said? It's definitely an early Cure mood piece, if you know what I mean. It's just total mood that they would this is kind of like the springboard to what's going to come. That's kind of the way I look at it. Even though it's a bit primitive, boy, does it sound great. And when Todd, you were mentioning them playing like some of these songs later with Boris playing drum. When you hear the later band play this early material, I think it's even, should I dare say, better?
Oh, I think
love
so.
it. I love it when they do.
I was just going to interject and say, go find any Cure live performance you can find from later than 1980, and I guarantee you, A Forest will be on it, and A Forest will be one of the best songs, if not the best song. Wow. They got so good at playing that song. I've only seen them once. I saw them in 1992.
I saw them in 92.
Absolutely mesmerizing. And a forest was one of the centerpieces of the set and one of the best.
And there are
parts.
so many great videos out on YouTube. I mean, every time even recently, they've probably played this stuff. I mean, there's tons of stuff, but I love it when the current band or, the classic band from, the Kiss Me band or the Disintegration band. You're right.
Oh, yeah.
An entire DVD of the Cure videos. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got a forest on there.
There's a concert, and I don't know if it ever officially made it to DVD, but it was really popular on VHS called The Cure in Orange. And
yes,
my, is that so good?
I think it might have got, golly, did it get like a Blu-ray release? But I remember originally it was on Laserdisc.
It was on Laserdisc, and it was never on CD, but there was an unofficial vinyl version of it that I was thinking about buying, but it's very expensive.
There's one thing I keep thinking of part of this series. We've got to cover these B-sides.
I used to have that box. I don't have it anymore. I'm on the hunt for it.
I found my use at Half Price Books. It's got a marker through I don't know if this was a promo. I don't know. It wasn't very much. I think it was only like $20. But you don't see it very often, but it's out there. So there you go. We've all picked the same tracks off of 17 Seconds. Go
I'm
figure.
sure mine will be different from here now.
It might be. I don't know. All right, Reed, shall we go on to Faith?
Sure. So, like I said, I've established my pattern now, and I follow it for the rest of the albums. But for me, Faith's an interesting part of the Cure's evolution, because I think Faith is where they hit where they're going to be musically, but Robert Smith has not yet learned how to weaponize his lyrics. And in fact, he hits some of the same themes on Faith that he does on Pornography, but on Faith, you're like, yeah, this isn't too bad. And the exact same thing on Pornography is like, damn, this guy's got issues. He needs therapy.
Yeah.
So, I like Faith a lot. I of these 4 albums, Pornography I like the best still, but I like Faith a great deal. My first favorite track, I don't have a lot of really neat things to say about the album overall. My favorite first favorite track is Primary. So again, this one stands out to me because it's different. It's energetic. It's much less meditative and repetitive. Now, again, you have the repetitive bass and drums, but your movement comes from Smith's guitar lines. And I was looking up the personnel on it, and I guess Faith is mostly, well, it's Robert Smith, Simon Gallup, and Lol Tallhurst recording. So I guess they ditched their keyboard player. But again, it's mostly this very expansive, very meditative album. But then Primary comes in, and it's energetic, and it has some great. It's really, I think, the first that struck me as, man, Robert Smith is going to be a poet one of these days. And it has lines. I wrote this down, and these were just things that caught me as I was listening to it. I didn't go look up on didn't Google them or anything. But the very first time I saw your face, I thought of a song and quickly changed the tune. And he goes on to add the very first time he touched her and whatever. But what a great line. And it's sometimes I listen to Robert Smith's lyrics and go, I don't want to look up and see exactly what this guy's saying because I think it's super depressing. But I thought this is a really great song, and it's energetic. And if I'm wrong about it being a nice song, don't disillusion me because I enjoy this one. And it's nice to have an album that's not a total downer. It's more of an exploratory album. And then my second favorite, again, because I want that distillation of everything that I think the album represents, and that is, in fact, the song Faith. And this is really where I think you hear that David Bowie, Brian Eno influence. It is all over Faith. In fact, I actually hear a lot of callbacks on Faith to Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, which is interesting because Robert Smith says that Low was Bowie's last great album and that was the one that he listened to all the time. And I'm like, really? Because I hear a lot of there's a bass line earlier in the album, and it's escaping me now. But I'm like, that sounds like it's coming right off of Scary Monsters. It's all good. For me, the song Faith is like it's the apex of meditative cure. It's even one step beyond the forest for me in terms of just it establishes that mood and you just float along with it. But where it distinguishes itself from where he would go on Pornography is the delivery of the material and lyrics. Like he fades out singing, "There's nothing left but faith." But the way he says it doesn't make you go, "Oh, that's the most horrible thing in the world," right? He says it. There's nothing left but faith. He's kind of singing it, but it's not an attack. And then that fades out and the drums are left going. And that's a very gentle, the song just kind of coasts to a halt, which is fine, but it doesn't have the impact that he would apply to the songs on Pornography that are similarly themed. And more on that when we get to Pornography.
Excellent. Holy mackerel. Well said, Reed. Well said. Well, Todd, since you're going to shake it up.
Well, I'm not a whole lot, but so
why don't you, I'm going to hand it over to you so we can be shook up.
Faith is the only, out of all these albums, Faith is one that I've listened to the least. I had never heard it as an album until 4 or 5 months ago when we prepped for that Contrarian show. But so I'm like a baby when it comes to Faith. So I don't have a physical copy of it. I just ordered one, so it's on the way. But anyway, I picked Primary as my first one. And Primary, again, I keep saying the same thing over and over, but will become a concert standard. And it does stand out from the songs around it. It's got kind of a driving sound to it, but it's hypnotic at the same time. And I don't really have that much more to say about it. It's another one of those songs that was on Head on the Door, not Head on the Door, Standing on a Beach. And so I remember it in that context. I'm pretty sure it was on that.
I think so, yeah.
But my second one that I picked is The Funeral Party.
Oh,
and the reason that I picked that one is the super lush keyboards in it. And they'll go there a lot later, but I just love that synth sound. And I think it really elevates that song and that album. That the song is slow and sad and dark and everything that I like about a Cure song from this period. And my honorable mentions for this album, the ones that I almost picked, were Faith and Doubt, which I also think are also good. And I think this album is more consistently good than the two albums before it. But I'm still in the discovery phase.
Yeah, I get it. Well, they're one of those bands I think that as they keep going, they improve. I think they get to a certain point, and peak. It's not like XTC, which always went up and better and better and better. The Cure kind of went up, plateaued, and kind of went back down.
I don't think the downward slide is very steep, but there is one.
No, but it's like self-parody. You get to that point. If you know what I'm saying.
Spoilers for future episodes.
Yeah, the Cure's trying to be the Cure instead of just letting it happen. That's the way I look at it. Not that it's bad. I'm just throwing it out there. So anyway, Faith, I love this record. And like I said before, it was hard for me to pick one. But Reed, we're on the same track. I went with Primary as well. And the thing is, when you were talking about the guitars on there, the funny thing about that part is that both Simon and Robert Smith are playing bass on it. Now, I think I think Simon's playing bass, but I think Robert Smith's playing a 6-string bass. If you ever watch any of the Cure concerts, Robert Smith's always playing 6-string bass a lot. He's always
Yeah,
playing those Fender sixes.
yeah, it's called a Speed 6, I think.
Yeah,
But
he's
yeah, it's
got
a
a
6-string.
Schecter, and then he's got. They used to play those Fender sixes all the time. But I'm thinking that might be what it is because it covers that. It can do those bass tones, but then you can get those guitar tones out of it. They're just a unique sounding instrument. But yeah, it's just bass from what I understand. There's no keyboards in it. It's just very hypnotic. But I do love that bass interplay, the way Robert and they just kind of interweave their lines. I love that stuff. But it's very danceable. It's almost goth pop, I would have to say. Even though it's experimental to some degree, but I never get tired of it, and I think it was a great single. In fact, that was their third single that they put out. But that's my number one, and my number two is Faith. The reason I like Faith is kind of like what Reed said, but I think Faith is, it's the last track on the album. I think if you would have I think what it does is show what's coming down the line. Shape of things to come. It's 6 minutes of, call it goth or whatever. If this had the production of Disintegration, it would have fit perfectly on that album.
Sure.
Because it's still within that same realm of songwriting, but you just give that Dave Allen production. Oh, yeah. When Dave Allen left, that just broke my heart because, man, he and Robert Smith together were so good. But anyway, this is dark, and it would I think it's just refined better with Disintegration and what came further down the line. But yeah, I went with Faith.
Well, it's a great song.
I know, and no one consulted. No one was trading notes for this. It's just how it's worked out. Excellent. Okay, well, Reed, let's go on to Pornography. 1982. And I did look up Robert Smith. He was in Susie and the Banshees in 1983. So he broke up the Cure after this. And then, or he might have been doing them both at the same time. But I know he put the Cure on hiatus.
Okay. Well, Pornography, like you said, often cited as the first goth record. Susie and the Banshees also cited as a proto-goth unit. I think I mentioned in our Doors chat, the Doors were the first band ever to be referred to as gothic in print, although I no longer remember the exact citation for that. But this is a dark album. It is a dark, heavy album. I said this is the album where Robert Smith takes all of whatever was causing his emotional issues at the time, and he weaponizes them. And the delivery on some of the songs, it's not just, some of them he delivers very matter-of-factly. It doesn't matter if we all die. He's not saying that like menacingly. He's just like, he's pointing it out. No big deal. It's just a thing. But then you get to some of the other songs and he's howling in despair.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, it's not an album that sometimes I feel so much empathy for the singer that I can't listen to the music like my wife loves Joni Mitchell. I can't listen to Joni Mitchell. that woman communicates so much emotion in her music. I'm like, I can't. It's too intense for me. Where weirdly Robert Smith's emotions are so raw and so aggressive on this album that it actually has the opposite effect. It pushes me away, and I'm able to just listen to it and in a weird way enjoy it. And it is my favorite of these first four.
Wow.
Probably because I love the intensity of it. But that said, I do think it's a little samey in terms of the tone of the songs. They don't vary the guitar sound. They don't vary the bass and drum sound. I would like a little more light and shade on the album. So my two songs that I picked off of this one, my first one, I picked Siamese Twins. Siamese Twins is a really intense song. It has a very strange lyric that starts out. Now, again, you know, all lyrics are open to interpretation, right? So this is just what I get out of reading his lyrics. If somebody else got something else, that's, also perfectly cool. Art is in the receiver more than the transmitter. But it starts off like a man meeting his first love, and they are Siamese twins because they are joined together. Other than that strange part about walking up the stairs with a knife in his hand, which I can only visualize that as a callback to the first Halloween movie, which came out prior to Pornography. In which Michael Myers is going up the stairs to stab his sister to death while she's having sex. What that says about his mindset in this relationship, I have literally no idea, but it can't be good. But then you get to the end, and he's always, the repeated refrain is it always like this? So at the beginning, he's madly in love. He's feeling this overwhelming passion, and he just keeps saying, is it always like this? I woke up in the morning and I cried because we had such an intense experience last night. Is it always like this? And then he gets to the end of the song, and he's estranged from his lover. And now when he looks at her, he either feels nothing or he feels anger, and he wants to know, is it always like this? Is it doomed to fail? And unlike Faith, where he lets the song trail away, he howls it at the end. Is it always like this? And in fact, the music stops, and the last thing you hear is his voice howling, is it always like this? And that is one of the most affecting pieces of music that I think Robert Smith recorded. That sticks with me more than any other song on these first 4 albums. What an emotion.
Wow.
Now, my second is exactly the opposite of that, I hope. And again, if I'm wrong, don't tell me, because I want to feel like there's some hope on this album. And that's A Strange Day.
Mm-hmm.
And gather myself a little bit here. So A Strange Day is kind of you start off thinking that it's very much like the rest of the songs on Pornography. The music's very similar. And then he gets to that beautiful little guitar line. And you're like, oh, what's that? And it changes the characteristic of the song completely. So this is not one that I've looked up the lyrics, because if I'm wrong and it's super depressing, I don't want to know, because this track is the only light on this album. And I need that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my second, A Strange Day.
Wow. Excellent choice. Todd, I'm interested to see what you're going to have to say.
My first choice first of all, I want to say Pornography. You look at who's on it, and it's a lineup that you expect: Robert Smith, Simon Gallup, and Lawrence Tollhurst. But it's great. Robert Smith, voice, guitar, keyboards; Simon Gallup, bass, keyboards; Lawrence Tollhurst, drums, keyboards. So I see 3 keyboardists, and I'm like, okay, this is an album for me. So not to typecast myself, but I picked for the first one. I picked 100 Years. 100 Years.
Nice.
It's another song that's going to make its way into the set list and stay there for a long time. Will sound better and better every time they play it. The guitar in this song is so haunting and so beautiful. And let's talk about some lyrics here. Let's see here. Under a black flag, 100 years of blood, crimson, the ribbon tightens around my throat. I open my mouth and my head bursts open. I sound like a tiger thrashing in the water, over and over. We die one after another, over and over. We die one after the other. So those are to borrow Reed's words, definitely weaponized.
Yes.
But you don't necessarily feel that kind of I mean, you sort of feel that kind of despair when you listen to it, but it's maybe not at quite that level. And then the second song that I picked off Pornography is Cold. And I like that it's got kind of a brooding bass line. I think it's keyboard bass, not totally sure. And some absolutely gorgeous synth textures on that song. Really dark and really beautiful. Let me see. I want to read some of this too. A shallow grave, a monument to the ruined age. Ice in my eyes, and my eyes like ice don't move. Screaming at the moon, another past time. Your name like ice into my heart. Yikes. Makes you want to call him up and ask him if he wants to go have a coffee and talk about it. But
it's a goth masterpiece. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah. And so it was really difficult not to pick The Hanging Garden and The Figurehead because I also love those two.
Yeah.
And now that Reed talks about the lyric, when he talked about the lyrics of Siamese Twins, now I want to go back and listen to that one because I think I might have missed something. So I'm going to spend some time with that one too.
It's not an easy song.
Well, I mean, this album isn't an easy listen either. The other albums that came before were a little bit more easy to digest. This is, something else. So, Todd, what's your second? Oh, did you already do your?
I already did. I said Cold. 100 years old.
Sorry. We're just zipping along. I'm trying to keep up. Well, you did mention The Hanging Garden. It seems like I keep choosing all the singles for some reason. My number one is The Hanging Garden. You know how we mentioned before, Reed, you were talking about how very Joy Division sounding, the previous records were. Well, this song definitely sounds like Susie and the Banshees. Those drums by Budgie. I mean, The Hanging Garden, you could put Susie's voice on it. I swear to God, it'd be a Susie and the Banshees song. But I think it's great. I mean, Chris Perry was looking at all these tracks in this record, and he could not figure out what would be the single off of this record. But he picked this. I think that's probably the best choice. Is this commercial? No. But at least it's a little bit half upbeat compared to the rest of the record. And like I said, this record's a tough listen. I would not say that we're not doing album reviews, but I wouldn't say that this is really my favorite. The reviews for this album at the time were very mixed. I think Rolling Stone only gave it a 1.5 stars, but most of the reviews, people didn't care for this record. It's a bit jarring. I mean, now it's considered a classic. It started a whole movement. But I think The Hanging Garden for me is great. The other song I picked, Reed, right on track. I picked A Strange Day.
I love that song so much.
Give Me Your Eyes So I May See. I mean, I love the lyrical content of this whole song. I almost look at this as every album or each song or each 45 with The Cure is almost like a building block. If you, the only thing on this that really kind of irks me on Pornography that they would refine it even more. If they got rid of the drum machine on this track, I think it would make it stronger. Some of the production choices, I don't know if that's Phil Thornalley or Robert Smith, but you have to think about it. It's 1982. Okay. I guess it would fit in right there, but they refined, their albums so quickly and just so, I don't know. If you listen to like Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me or Head on the Door or Disintegration, those records haven't aged. This, I do think you could put this in 1982. I don't think it's aged as well. as some of their later stuff. But like I said, this album, it was tough for me to pick anything off of it because this is not an easy. This album's not an easy listen. But yeah, I just went with Strange Day. I think, like what Reed, I agree with whatever Reed had said before. I not much more I can add to that. But yeah, Hanging Garden, Strange Day. It seems like everybody on this record, we're all over the place to some degree.
5 different songs, I think, at this time. Is that right? I think 5 different.
I guess right. That's good. I guess.
So
does that make it since we all pick different songs, does that mean that this record's stronger? I'm just throwing that out.
It may be. It's one thing. I'm going to presume that anybody who watches the Music Warehouse is going to be kind of in our same age bracket, but it's so hard to recreate historical context. When you talk about this record being jarring, well, it's 40 years later. So we've all got 40 years under the bridge on this album. But when it came out, it was like the height of the new romantic movement, right? So, this is records like ABC and Spandau Ballet and Culture Club. Britain was putting out happy music. And then the Cure comes out with freaking Pornography. You can only imagine what a slap in the face this to anybody who was listening to this kind of music. You miss out on that now.
But I think this is probably the moment where they start attracting the people who needed to hear this. And I think that's when you have the goth movement and the people who really, really identified with this stuff. I think Pornography is where it starts to happen. And
this is where
there are people that needed this. So
and right after this, Robert Smith started wearing the mascara and doing his hair and black lipstick. It all started with this.
Yeah.
So
it certainly isn't Girls on Film.
This isn't Duran Duran Rio. And don't get it confused.
And I wanted to say earlier, I couldn't think of the current Cure drummer. His name is Jason Cooper. And the current lineup of the Cure is Robert Smith, Simon Gallup, Roger O'Donnell, Jason Cooper, and Reeves Gabriels. And other than flip-flopping Jason Cooper with Boris Williams, I don't think I could come up with a better lineup. I hope they tour because I'd love to see that.
Although I think the bass player left last year.
He came back.
Did he? Because he said some really nasty things when he left.
Yeah, he came back.
Yeah.
He was about, 2 or 3 weeks later. He said, I've returned to the Cure or something like that. He's listed on Wikipedia as a current member.
Wow, okay.
I don't know whether that was an exercise just to see what people would do, but I was heartbroken. I mean, visually seeing the Cure without him with that bass almost down to the floor just made me sad. I was just like, so many lineups.
I mean, other than he wasn't in the band on the top, but then he came back. He's been on all the records except for like 2 records.
Mm-hmm.
I recently get a lot of guitar related spam, and I love Reeves Gabrels, so I get articles on Reeves all the time. He just did an interview where he was going over, pieces of music gear he can't live without, which is hilarious because Reeves changes guitar gear like every day. The man can't sit still with anything. But he says in this interview, there's a throwaway line that says, "This is the amp I used on the new Cure record." Reeves is not on any published Cure album. So
no, because he came later. The last album was what? Was it 07?
He's been touring, but he wasn't on album. So apparently there is a Cure record that is recorded that just hasn't been released. So
if you follow Robert Smith on Twitter, he types in all caps and his messages are very, very cryptic. But apparently there were 3 different projects, I think, that they were working on, and they finally decided which one was the next Cure album. And so if he's being super careful about about wanting it to be, something really good because he may be the last one, then I'm more power to him. I hope that's what's happening. I found a blurb about Simon. On 15th August 2021, Simon stated on his Facebook page that he had left the Cure he was asked why. He said, "I got fed up with the betrayal." No,
Yeah, I mean, he was nasty.
Yeah, no official statement about Gallup's departure was made by Smith or the band, but Gallup later deleted the post. And in October 2021, he used the same social media account to clarify that he is still a member of the band. So I don't know what happened there, but I imagine it's internal negotiations of some kind.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine the band without him though.
Yeah, and the second part didn't get a lot of attention. It didn't get as much attention as the part where he said he wasn't in it anymore. When he came back and said, "I am still in it," didn't make much of a wave.
2008 was the last studio album, which is that's quite a that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then before that, 04 and then 2000. But they haven't been that prolific since 96. Well, we haven't changed the world with this discussion, but we are kind of similar.
Yeah.
Is Pornography the better record? Because of our opinions we've picked 5 off Pornography. I don't know. Maybe. Could be. But I do love Faith and 17. I will say that. I love those 2 records. I don't know. There you go. Todd Evans, Reed Little.
Awesome. Loved it.
Thanks for having me.
It was fun. So next time we'll hang on before we get off. We'll set up our date. So next time is going to be The Top, Head on the Door, and Kiss Me, and then we'll just keep every month we'll just do one. So we have plenty of time to get everything together. But yeah, The Top, Head on the Door, and Kiss Me should be pretty easy
for you guys. Maybe.
Looking forward to
well,
that.
Rod, you got it. I mean, Reed, you've got a month.
I know. And I'm going to enjoy doing my research.
All right. All right, everybody. Appreciate everybody coming on. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Good night, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Good night. Thanks a lot.